Leading people well is tough, even in the best of times. But what do we do when it gets really, really tough? How do we as leaders respond to adversity in a healthy and productive way? How can we continue to succeed in business and in life through the storms of leading well? You know, when dangerous storms begin to brew over the horizon, most herd animals and even humans have a tendency to take cover or move away from the storm, but not the buffalo. The buffalo, instead of running for cover, will gather its herd, take a few last bites of whatever food is out there, and head directly through the storm. As leaders, we have to do the same thing. We're all faced with different storms that come with leading well. Modern day leaders face leadership storms that can cripple an individual, a team, or an entire organization. Our guests are resilient leaders, some of the best resilient leaders our country has to offer. They'll walk us through how they actually got through these storms and how they became better on the other side. So join us on the Through the Storm podcast. Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever day or time it is that you're listening to this, and welcome to the Through the Storm podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Travis Hearne, and this is a podcast where we talk about hard things. We talk about going through the storm as leaders. We talk about leaders, we talk with leaders who have done the impossible, who've done some difficult things in their lives and in their careers. And today is no exception. We have Jason Miller with us. So Jason is the founder of the Strategic Advisor Board and became the senior global council member, CEO, and chairman of the board upon its inception. He holds multiple chair roles within other companies to include several nonprofits. Jason's major strengths are in hyper company growth, scaling, deal flow management, and strategic and operational implementation. Jason has built over 24 companies of his own from the ground up since 2001. As the CEO, Jason has been charged with overseeing the growth of the Strategic Advisor Board and the oversight of the team and its capabilities as a core business globally. His primary focus is to maintain a positive company culture, which allows its partners and council members to thrive in their duties while serving SAB clients across the globe. Not only that, but he is a retired Army first sergeant who's seen his fair share of storms. We were talking before this. I called him an officer, and he was, I don't know, we work for a living. So as an enlisted guy myself, Jason, welcome to the podcast, man. It's so good to have you here.
Yeah, man, Travis, thank you very much for now. I got to live up to all that stuff you read.
Oh, dude, you live up to this thing every day. I do want to ask you one question about what you about your bio. You talk about you want to maintain a positive company culture which allows its partners and council members to thrive. What does that mean to you?
Well, you know, we live in a time where, you know, like this podcast, there's always storms, right? And I mean, there's a storm every day. And if you can't drive a positive culture within inside of your company, you know, those storms are a lot worse, right? And I know it's so overused, this whole company culture, blah, 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 right? But the truth behind the matter is that culture means a lot of things. It doesn't just mean, oh, you know, we've got ball pits and, you know, coffee machines and all, you know, that kind of stuff. That's not culture. Culture is driven by leadership, man. I mean, culture is just, you know, walking by a cubicle one day and stopping and just having a conversation with somebody that works for you. That's culture, right? That's like showing positive reinforced leadership. And you're having these little mini these little counseling sessions, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing to get to do that. And I do it all the time, and I love to do it. And that's kind of why I pride myself in, you know, having that good culture within inside the team itself.
Yeah, and like the success of SAB is directly correlated, I think, to that culture that you've built. You've grown this thing into something that is great, and like people want to be a part of it, and people want to be coupled with you. So it's just like what you've done through culture building, and you have it in your mission statement, you have it everywhere. That's just the way it's at. So thank you for building that culture. And that's one of the things we talk about on the podcast is like, man, we got to, the culture is what you create as a leader. You set the culture, you set the standard. You have to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk at the same time. You can't just, like you said, throw a bunch of beanbags around and nap pods and expect that to be the culture. You have to be able to know what people are thinking and doing and saying, and you need to be able to have conversations, whether those are hard conversations, easy conversations, knowing people's birthdays, stuff like that. And it truly does matter, man. And so jumping into the next points, man, you've been through a lot. You've built this company from the ground up. You've built several companies from the ground up. You served in the Army for how long did you serve?
23.
23 years, man, 23 years of serving in the Army, making it to first sergeant. You have undoubtedly been through some of the worst storms and some of the most trying storms that people can imagine. So the question I have for you is, tell me about the worst storm that you've been through. Tell me about one of the storms that really set you back on your heels.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of military ones, but that's not where I'm going to go with this right now. Where I'm going to go with this is to 3.5 years ago. I had a very dear friend of mine that ran a staffing agency, and all of the clients in her company were all my clients. She was my go-to for staffing, so on and so forth. And she was a very dear friend. And I woke up one day and just got a call from one of the staff members saying she had had a massive brain aneurysm and died. And so for me, I mean, that might not sound like a big storm, but when you have, over 100 people that are in that company as clients and staffing people that are staffing those clients, right? It's like you only got a couple choices. You either let it all go or you just take it over, right? And there's this kind of, you could probably find it somewhere. There's this picture of me, and I don't know why my wife took it, but she just did. And I'm sitting on the hearth in the living room with a pad of paper and a pen in this hand. And I'm on the phone and I'm just leaned over like this and trying to figure out what we were going to do from that point, right? There was no leadership in place. There was nothing, right? It was nothing. It was 100 and some Filipinos that didn't know how to run businesses. They were, executive assistants doing admin work and stuff like that. So now all of a sudden you have 100 families on the line too, right? And so I started getting into, the family wanted nothing to do with it. And I started getting into things. The books were just torched. I took it over, paid off all of its debt, couple $100,000 into it. And I trained the senior manager, who is now today, 3 years later, the chief executive officer of that company.
Wow. And
we made it through that damn storm.
Man, so how did you make it there? What were some of the key things that really helped you to make it through that storm?
So I had to really go in and lead the staff. And well, there was no staff. I had to create like an executive staff inside of the company, with the brightest ones that were there, right? And so the CEO now, she was the one managing most of it, and she was 25 at the time. And I mean, she just was a trooper, man. I mean, and she listened, she paid attention, she hung on every word. and she put systems and processes in place that we went over them together to, keep the company from collapsing on itself. And, from there, I kept a pretty tight rope on things for about 2 years, I suppose, and stayed in control. And I think it was last year. Last year, I named her the CEO of the company last year.
Man.
And I gave her the ropes, and she was ready for it.
How does that feel for you when you hand over the ropes or something like that after the storm you went through? How does that feel to hand that over?
Well, I don't know, bittersweet. Is that the right thing? Maybe.
Yeah.
Bittersweet to have, taken something that was probably seconds from collapsing and, now making the people that actually make it happen are the ones that are running it, because it's a co-op too now. So I made it a co-op model. So they're all owners in the company too.
That's wow, man. That's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And starting from such a crazy place of somebody passing away suddenly, right. Not just that it wasn't a buildup. It was like, it was a sudden thing.
And I loved her to death, but the company was mismanaged for years, and it was used as a piggy bank, basically.
Yeah.
And that was tough. That was tough to take that over, but I didn't really have a choice. Yeah. So that's truly, when you get backed into a corner like that, you just got to do something drastic and make it happen. That's what it comes out to being.
No, absolutely. And I don't know if it's a military thing or just a leadership thing. This is something we can learn. When you face that storm, there's nothing else you can do. You got to go through it. You can't go around it. You can't run away from it. That's one of those things you have to knuckle up and you have to go straight through that thing. Otherwise it's going to fail. And like you said, it's going to impact lives, families. Right. It's going to have severe implications for so many people if you don't go through that storm head on. So,
well, here's a little military point though.
Yeah.
Not a story about something that happened, but in an ambush, they always teach you to run into the fire, right? That's what they teach you to do. Otherwise, you end up in the fatal funnel no matter where you go, right? So the idea there, there's no good outcome in that usually, but the idea is at least you get over the hump and behind the line and can survive, right?
Yeah.
So there again, you look at all of these examples in history or in the military or in business, all the wins weren't people that turned and ran the other way.
Yeah.
They ran into it. Oh, look, there's a thumbs up. They ran into it. So
yeah. And that's, it is, if you run into it, it's counterintuitive, but that's your best chance for survival. Mm-hmm. Yep. By running into it and avoiding that. So the learning from that, and there's probably lessons that you learned that you still carry with you to this day from that storm. What are some of those lessons that you learned after going through that you still implement today, that you still hold on to today?
Grit matters. Grit matters. I always look at, I don't think it's called this anymore, but the acronym used to be leadership, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, all those things, right? And personal courage. I think that's the 7 of them. But you start looking at that, right? That's the key right there. That's how you get through this stuff. Is you don't get through it stepping back, feeling sorry for yourself, or I lost and holy crap, now I'm going to go feel sorry for myself for a week, right? And that's not how this works. You got to get up and dust yourself off. I'd say some other things, but they're not appropriate for the show. A different show. But, you just got to keep fighting all the time, always fighting. I never stopped fighting.
Yeah. But never stop fighting, man. That's how you get through the storm. That's how you move through it. That's how you do it. And that's how you've done it. I mean, you've got over 30 years of building and consulting and really crafting leaders into successful business people and crafting their organizations into successful organizations. So this wasn't on the question card that I sent you, but man, I just want you to tell me a little bit about the Strategic Advisor Board, and I want you to just talk about some of the things that you guys do and some of the aha moments that you've had over those 30 years of like, hey, we've seen this work, we've seen this not work. Like, how have you built what you've built over the last 30 years?
So the genesis of that whole thing is literally doing it differently. That's the genesis of it. I'm not going to name the big consulting firms. Everybody knows who they are. I wanted to do it differently, and I didn't want to do it in a way where I took a business owner that was maybe making $3 to $5 million a year and go in there and have crap loads of retainers at $250,000, all this stuff, right? Because then all I'm doing is the opposite. I'm just disabling them, right? So we didn't do any of that. And, the genesis of the first program was purely 10% of revenue. So if we couldn't grow that company, we didn't get paid. Now, you want to talk about put your money where your mouth is, for sure, right? And we still have clients in that model today. And, but what I learned through that is a lot of companies don't need 3 years of help, right? They don't need that. What they need is very pinpointed, very specific help. And that's what we created with our intensive. One day they come here. I just had somebody here yesterday, spent all day with them. And they come here one day and we just completely retool their entire company in one day.
Wow.
And it's a long day. It's from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. But now imagine walking away from something and you have an action plan to actually succeed. And to me, that's like the ultimate goal of distilling this company down to where it is today.
My gosh. And it's so true. You got a lot of consulting companies, and I am one of them. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people want to go. They want that 3-year plan. They want that 3-year contract to be able to go. We can change your organization in a year, in 2 years, and it can be true that if it takes 3 years to fix the company, then there's a lot of it. It's going to take more than one consulting firm to do it.
Right.
But
there's
if you can
empower in there.
Yeah, there's a whole lot going on there. But if you can take your model and dig into the leaders and be like, hey, tell me about your organization. Let's dissect this thing down to the nuts and bolts of how it works, how your culture is built, things like that, and have them walk away with a game plan that they can implement. I mean, that's a tangible tool that you're giving these guys and gals to go fix their organization.
Yeah, that's right. I call it deconstruct, reconstruct.
Love it. That's perfect. So with the reconstruct part of that, how do you help them what's your part in their reconstruct process?
So, I have parts of the team that are involved in that. So it's live. They'll fly in here, because here's the thing. I truly believe you can only be really good at 3 to 4 things, right? You start getting outside of that, then you become a generalist, right? And that's nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares about a generalist, right? So caught myself. Anyway, so I stick to my parts. I fly my tech guy in. He does his part. I fly my branding expert in. I fly all these people in that are good at what they do. And we completely tear this business model down and re-put it back together the right way, right? It was the right way when they started, but they outgrew it.
Yeah. Hopefully. I mean, that's a sign of success. If you're growing, you're going to outgrow your initial model no matter what. And you're going to need help to bring yourself to the next level of growth, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. And we do a lot in the sales pipeline stuff,
and,
all that too. So we do, they get content for a whole year. My whole camera team comes, they get content for a whole year, new photos, all the stuff. Right. But none of that's the important part. The important part is the core of the business itself. Once you got that right, and the owner of that company knows how to, traverse that company throughout the year when it's good and when it sucks too, that's how you create the win. So, and I like the after story a year later. That's where it's at.
Yeah. That's where you find the true, like you figure out if it worked, how it worked, what do you need to tweak, things like that, man. Yeah. So the way that you operate with people is through the lens of leadership, is focusing on leaders, making sure they're leading well. I'm going to end the podcast before I'll turn it over to you for where people can find you and what you want people to know. But I want to know, what do you want to tell? What if you had 1 to 2 things that you could tell, like a leadership bomb that you could drop on people listening? What advice would you give leaders who are struggling, who are trying to go through the storm? What advice would you give them?
Just be awesome every day.
Yeah.
Negativity is not awesome. Look at the positive stuff in life, not just in your business, but in your family life, your friends, the people around you. You are the sum of the couple 100 feet around you usually, right?
Yep.
Just be freaking awesome. Look at yourself as awesome every day. And I'm not trying to be woo-woo. I'm just saying that, if you're not right yourself, you can't help other people be right either.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, because mindset is a choice, man.
Sure it is.
Like you said, mindset is a choice. We can wake up and we can think, and I'm not saying that I don't fall into this trap sometimes, like, oh, this day is going to be this, that, or the other. But we can wake up and we can choose to have a different mindset, and we can live the day that way.
Yeah.
So,
man.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So I want to leave you with the last couple seconds, whatever that looks like. Where can people find you? What do you want people to know about Jason Miller and the Strategic Advisor Board?
Well, I will say this, and I'm scrolling because just bear with me a minute here, because I wanted to read something that I wrote it the other day, and it is, when you focus on the good gets better.
That is so good. That's the title of this podcast.
I wrote it in my leadership council last week, and I just thought, I was sitting there thinking, and I was like, you know what? When you focus on the good gets better. And as far as what I want people to know about me, is very simple. I'm a humble servant. I've been serving people all my life. All of my companies, active, 18 of them right now. That's what we do. We just serve people. And I believe in service. And if you can start there as a business owner to serve first, everything else will just fall in line. And that's not just some overused cliche. It's true. I always say, give value as long as it takes. And if you give value as long as it takes, people will see that, and that will reciprocate itself. Might not be today, might not be tomorrow, but I don't know about you, brother, but I ain't looking for instant gratification today anyway.
No. Oh no, man, that's so good. And like, you truly are a servant leader, and one of the best I know. It's just like, I people, go check him out. follow him on on LinkedIn, follow him on, go check out SAB, the Strategic Advisor Board. Jason, man, thank you so much for your time, for what you do, for how you build your companies, for how you build your organization, for how you lead your people, and for being the servant leader that you are. Man, it's a rare thing these days, which is sad, but oftentimes people think you can't be a servant leader and be powerful at the same time, but you embody both of those things very, very well. Yeah. And it's an honor to know you. Thank you for being on the show. And for all those listening, thank you for tuning in. This has been the Through the Storm podcast. Subscribe. You're going to hear a lot more from a lot of people about, leading through storms. And, this is just some great conversation. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.